اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Abu Sa'id radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, Allah Jalla Jalaluhu says, the person who is occupied with the Quran and is therefore unable to engage in my remembrance and to ask of me, I shall give him something superior to what I give to those who ask of me. The superiority of the speech of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu over all other speech is like the superiority of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu over His creation. Mentioned by Tirmidhi. Abu Dharr al-Ghifari radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, you cannot return to Allah with anything better than what came from Him. In other words, the Quran. Mentioned by Hakim. Jabir radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, the Quran is an intercessor whose intercession is accepted and a disputant who is trusted. He who places the Quran before him, it will lead him to paradise. He who places it behind his back, it will lead him to the hellfire. Mentioned by Ibn Hibban. Note, the words and a disputant who is trusted mean that the Quran argues on behalf of the person who reads it and practices on it. It also demands its rights from those who did not bother about it and did not fulfill its rights. Abdullah ibn Amr radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, fasting and the Quran shall intercede for a person. Fasting will say, O my sustainer, I prevented him from good and desires by day, so accept my intercession in his favor. The Quran will say, O my sustainer, I prevented him from sleep at night, their intercession will be accepted. Mentioned by Ahmad. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, Allah elevates through this book, Quran, many people and debases many others, Muslim. In other words, those who practice on it are bestowed with honor in this world and in the hereafter. Those who did not practice on it are disgraced and humiliated. Abu Dharr radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said to him, be constant in the recitation of the Quran and the remembrance of Allah, because it is a worthy mention of you in the heavens and a light for you on earth. Mentioned by a Muslim. Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, there is no jealousy except in two matters. Number one, a person to whom Allah gave this book and he lives by it by day and night. Number two, a person to whom Allah gave wealth and he spends it in charity by day and night. Mentioned by Muslim. Abu Musa al-Ashari radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, the similitude of the believer who recites the Quran is like that of a citron. Its fragrance is beautiful and its taste is good. The similitude of the believer who does not recite the Quran is like that of a date. It has no fragrance and its taste is good. The similitude of a hypocrite who recites the Quran is like that of a basil. Its fragrance is beautiful, but its taste is bitter. The similitude of a hypocrite who does not recite the Quran is like that of a blossom. It has no fragrance and its taste is bitter. Mentioned by a Muslim. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, he who recites a single letter of the Quran shall receive one reward, and each reward is multiplied 10 times. I do not say Alif, Lam, Mim is one letter, but Alif is one letter, Lam is one letter, and Mim is one letter. Mentioned by Tirmidhi. Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, learn the Quran and recite it. Surely the similitude of the Quran for he who learns it and recites it is like that of a vase which is filled with musk. Its fragrance spreads everywhere. The similitude of he who learns it and lies down in order to sleep while it is within him, having memorized it, is like that of a vessel sealed with musk. Mentioned by Tirmidhi. Note, the Quran is compared to musk, while the chest of a Hafiz is compared to a vessel which contains musk. The Hafiz who recites the Quran is therefore like a vessel which is open, and the one who does not recite it is like a vessel which is closed. Imran ibn Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates, I heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam saying, the person who recites the Quran must ask of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu by means of the Quran, because there will come such people who will recite the Quran and beg of the people by means of the Quran. Mentioned by Tirmidhi. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that while Usayd ibn Hudayr was reciting one night in his mirbad, when his horse started moving about, he continued reciting, the horse moved about again. He continued reciting and it moved about again. Usayd says, I feared that it would tremble Yahya. I therefore stood up to go to it. Suddenly I saw something like a canopy above my head. It had something like lamps in it. It ascended into the atmosphere till I could no longer see it. In the morning, I went to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said, O Messenger of Allah, while I was reciting in the middle of the night in my mirbad, my horse began moving about. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, recite, O Ibn Hudayr. I recited and it moved about again. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, recite, O Ibn Hudayr. I recited again and it moved about again. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, recite, O Ibn Hudayr. I turned around and saw Yahya close to the horse. I feared that it would trample him. Suddenly I saw something like a canopy which had something like lamps in it. It ascended into the atmosphere till I could no longer see it. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, those were the angels listening to you. Had you continued reciting, the people would have seen them, they would not have been hidden from them. Mentioned by Muslim. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates, I was sitting among a group of poor immigrants, Muhajirin. Some of them were sitting behind others in an effort to conceal their nakedness. They were so poor that they could not cover their entire bodies. One person was reciting the Quran when the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam approached and stood over us. When the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam arrived, the person who was reading the Quran remained silent. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam offered the salam, Islamic greeting, and asked, what were you doing? We replied, we had a person reciting the Quran to us. We were thus listening to the recitation of the book of Allah. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, all praise is due to Allah for having created such people whom I have been ordered to sit with. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then sat in the middle so that he may be at the same distance from each of us. He indicated to all to sit in this manner. They all sat in a circle with their faces turned towards him. Abu Sa'id radiallahu ta'ala anhu says, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not recognize any of them apart from me. He then said, O group of poor immigrants, glad tidings of perfect light for you on the day of resurrection. You shall enter paradise half a day before the wealthy people, and that half a day is equal to 500 years. Mentioned by Abu Dawud. Note, the probable reason for recognizing Abu Sa'id radiallahu ta'ala anhu and not the others is that it was during the darkness of the night, and because Abu Sa'id radiallahu ta'ala anhu was close to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to make amal upon whatever we have listened to, and may He give us the tawfiq to send this to others, inshallah. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayh.